So then that's it. We have that and we have this.
No, Vaush, this is so ridiculous.
No, you can change it. You can get 3, but right now there are 2.
No.
You agree with me.
No.
Right now there are 2. You can fight for
Vaush,
3. Right.
Who cares? I am fighting for 3.
That was 3 to 3.
People to
That was 3 and then 3.
Drei Gläser.
Force the vote fans and Brianna Joy Gray fans are subhuman pieces of shit. Or despicable.
We're gonna turn that down just a little. Vaush, you're too loud.
Like Brianna here. There are very few people on the quote left who I have.
All right, we're going.
Brianna Joy Gray. What a piece of shit. I do hate her. We're never gonna have her on the show. Brianna Joy Gray is a truly reprehensible
Okay.
person. Spineless, grifting,
Well, this is a start now, isn't it?
An idiot. I have no respect for Brianna Joy Gray. This is what we call a Joy Gray moment.
Wow.
No matter what she personally believes.
I've heard of poisoning the well, but this is a bit far. This is a bit tipping one hand.
She covers for fascists. She's represented.
Also, by the way, we're doing the big, like, bigger than my head water bottle because this is a long podcast.
Genuinely unhinged person. She'll never have me on. You'll never have me on, will you, Brianna? You know that wouldn't go well for you.
I'm excited to be joined today on Bad Faith Podcast for the first time by prolific Twitch streamer.
I feel like there should have been like a transition. Sorry, I shouldn't kill ice on stream. Just this one for fun. Say what up in the chat if you like chewing ice.
Streamer Vaush, welcome to the program.
Hello, what a pleasure to be here. Hope you're doing well this fine morning.
I am doing well. Look, so the reason I wanted to talk to you
It's probably because I was yelling because I'm chewing ice.
For the first time on Rising last week. We were brought on, the producers reached out to you to come and talk about some of the discourse that's been going around about Andrew Tate and this crisis of masculinity that seems to have been an ongoing problem and trend for some years now. The rise of popular internet figures like Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate as reflective of some deficit in society more broadly that is leading to both these YouTube figures, but also a lot of kind of dangerous socially maladaptive behavior offline, I would say, and whether or not the left has met the moment in this.
I don't know. Is she good or bad? I'm not the biggest fan of Brianna Joy Gray. I'd say for the most part, we would probably agree on like 90% of things. But I do think that I think she gives the right a bit too much. I think she plays, I think, a little bit too close to the center on certain issues, and kind of, at least in my opinion, she gives the right a lot of credit where credit, quite frankly, isn't earned. And that's probably my biggest issue. I would have to like really deeply look into all her tweets. I've seen her say stuff that I strongly disagreed with, but I don't have anything like off the top of my head that I'm like, this is dumb as fuck. Although I know I've said that she said dumb as fuck stuff, but I mean, let's be honest, who doesn't? But no, I do think that she is a bit of a centrist. I'd be lying if I thought that she was like any more, if she was any farther than centrist. Yeah, like it's just, yeah. We'll go with centrist. We'll go with a bit of a centrist.
Isolated, disillusioned by society.
No. Actually, no. I just thought about it. You know what my problem is? My problem with Brianna Joy Gray is the same problem I have with Crystal from Breaking Points, which is they both have a bias towards populism. Now, while I don't mind populism to a certain degree, unfortunately, populism tends to, especially in the conception of it as today, kind of tends to be whoever takes the anti-establishment and like the kind of like rebel position, or who kind of paints themselves that way, I should say. She kind of, her and Crystal, I think, fall into like well, the right says that they want to abolish the FBI, but and look, the left has had some real problems with the FBI, so why is it Marjorie Taylor Greene and other populist right fingers are outflanking leftist politicians on these issues, which I think is disingenuous, because the reason why Marjorie Taylor Greene would want to abolish the FBI is not because she has some ideological opposition to the work that they do. She has a problem with them investigating people of her ilk. Like that's her problem. I have a problem with the FBI because they like actively protect capital and they protect the status quo. But like, regardless of whatever system, the FBI is going to protect whatever the status quo is. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, you could reform the FBI, but like this political like theater of like abolishing it just because they investigate Trump is like, no. That's not the investigatory body I want to see. Like, that's not a positive change. Just getting rid of the FBI means we don't have the ability to track white supremacist violence throughout the country, which is exactly what Marjorie Taylor Greene would want, which is what would happen if, like, you know, the squad or squad adjacent politicians went along with Marjorie Taylor Greene's nonsense on behalf of Breonna Joy Gray. And like Crystal as a good example. Like we might share the same concerns or even the same like critiques to a degree, but like the reasoning behind those wildly different, and the outcomes that our two sides want to see wildly different. That's my issue with that, with her.
And what people noted after our interview was that there had been this history of you having had some substantive criticisms of me online, and it felt odd to folks that we had never actually talked about it before we were kind of in this public setting talking very cordially. Joining us now to discuss
Good God, these are
welcome to the show.
very up close.
My pleasure to be here. How y'all doing?
I'm glad Vaush decided to put the fucking towel over his fucked up ass chair.
All right. And I was impressed by your professionalism and decorum in that context, and I thought that you might be a good person to actually be able to have it out with and discuss some of our substantive disagreements, and also anything else you want to talk about today. How does that sound?
Oh, sure. Look, I love arguing with folks, but the masculinity Andrew Tate business, it's pretty serious. You know, I think it's important to take the opportunities you can to talk about it. Plus, there's just no fun in getting off in the head every time you're, in the same Zoom call with someone just because you've argued online. If folks did that, there'd be no way for anyone to do any kind of collaboration.
Also, I'm not going on with Vaush's mic. Jesus
I
Christ.
I gotta say, I don't see us as having really argued online. I have, become aware over the years of a number of, critical videos you've done about me. You, I believe, took offense to a radar that I did about defunding the FBI.
No matter what she personally believes, she covers for fascists.
We were on opposite sides of the.
Maybe I'm just crazy, but this does not look like, at least on my end, this does not look like great quality video. I don't know what's going on. Breonna Joy Gray has a lot of subs.
Movement was one of the most blatant grifts that got passed as left-leaning activism in the past several years.
Oh yeah, also Breonna Joy Gray is Force the Voter, which I'm not. So there's also that. That's probably the biggest thing that put her on my personal radar.
My political approach.
I wish I'd written a list. I've got such a bad memory. Look, the gist of it is this. And, we're all, not everyone's going to agree on every part of this. Some disagreement is natural. But I've noticed a tendency across the left where, as a reaction to the idea
we're turning up
and identity politics,
we're turning that up a bit. Okay.
The left's movement, the left coalition. I see some people who are moving towards this, the right and the left both have the same fundamentally, valid critique of society, which is to say that
it's even low on my end, and my fucking headphones are all the way up. Actually, here we might.
It's with a kind of like radical populist movement that is left-leaning but can reach out to the right.
Okay.
Principally, I don't disagree with this. It's definitely possible to take right populism.
I'll just keep an eye on it.
Economic elites and turn it in the right direction. Sometimes they're just mad about Jews. Really a coin flip on that one. Notice sometimes this discourse sort of spirals off and sends people in a bad direction. I've criticized Jimmy Dore plenty because I feel like he's one of the poster children for this particular movement, to the point now where he's just a Republican indistinguishable in every way. If I had any criticisms of your takes, they'd probably be somewhere in the line of that vein. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, right? This tendency, this line that's been drawn.
Yeah, I've heard people make that criticism, but I'm often confused as to why people make that criticism of me. So, for example, I know that you did an extended video on my Marjorie Taylor Greene is right, right? Which was an argument attempting to, with a provocative title and framing, say, hey, conservatives, not conservative leadership, I want to make sure that we make it.
Yeah, so that's, thank you, Joelle. That's also the thing, is there's constantly this we're not I don't want to, I don't get why people say that I create infighting. It's like, look, you can argue that your the way that you kind of propagate your talking points, you can be honest where it's does it create infighting? Yes, but I think it's good infighting, or I think it's good to reinforce our values or whatever it might be. But don't give me this bullshit it's oh, I don't what do you mean? I don't get why people say I create kind of an infighty environment. No, that's what my biggest issue was with Force the Vote. is it ended up just being a internal a way of basically disregarding people in the left movement, which only makes our movement smaller if you're constantly kicking people out for not agreeing with you on what was a tactic that was only useful for a very short period of time. And like the movement around Force the Vote lasted longer than the actual moment in which it would have been effective. And it only continued to be less and less affected to the point of it being damaging, like actively, which is why a lot of people backed out of their support of it. It's why like Sam Cedar did as a good example. I remember somebody mentioned that to me once.
And voters versus Republican or conservative politicos who I think are often acting in bad faith, whereas some voters have a good faith interest in a lot of these issues where there's overlap between the left and the right, but are being drawn to the right because they don't see a space for it on the left. I just want to be clear. I'm not giving any credence to what Marjorie Taylor Greene as a person is saying. But in the context of that radar, I'm saying, okay, let's acknowledge that for once, the right is adopting a position that has long belonged to the left.
They're not. They're not.
Deep state institutions have historically over-targeted the left and progressive movements.
That's not the argument. Whoa, that is not the argument that Marjorie Taylor Greene is making. That has never been a part of her argument. Marjorie Taylor Greene's actual argument is the opposite, that those institutions reinforce leftist values. Like she would dismantle them to target the left, not to rebalance, not to balance them. The fuck? Like what?
Whether it's the Black Panthers, whether it's communist and socialist movements in the first half of this century. And let's make sure that people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is not a good faith actor, who is buffoonish in her takes and in her politics and in her behavior, let's not let her be the one that owns the space. Let's use this opportunity, this opening that Republicans have set up to actually advocate for the kinds of reforms to these institutions that the left has always wanted to have. Let's take this moment and write it in our own image instead of completely abdicating our voice in this space. And I was really clear in that radar. I don't like Marjorie Taylor Greene. What she's fighting for is stupid.
The left has been pretty vocal about their opposition to the FBI and the CIA. I don't really think we need to stake our flag. Our flag's been there for quite a while.
To be, an almost exhausting level of caveating. Inevitably, there's someone who pipes up and says, "Oh, Brianna Joy Gray is running cover for Marjorie Taylor Greene." I think I called her. I forget what epithet I called her in the course of the radar, but
some kind
it wasn't
of racial
nice.
slur, no doubt.
LOL. But you know what I mean, Vaush. So what do you say to that?
Well, I remember that. This was the FBI discourse.
Mm-hmm.
It just, in the terms of Marjorie Taylor Greene and the, broken clock being right twice a day thing, it reminds me a little bit of like a Holocaust denier who, will briefly acknowledge the existence of the Holocaust only when comparing it to, COVID lockdowns or something, right? Very marginal, very narrow. I'm going to take the correct sort of framing on an issue for just a second, so it allows me to take, an awful take. Because I don't think, and you've said this, right? I don't think Marjorie Taylor Greene really has an issue with oh my goodness, sorry, it's so early. The FBI or institutional power. It's really just a matter of where it's being used. And right. I'm kind of curious about the way it's, kind of taken shape in this discourse too, because I don't really have an issue with the way the FBI has been behaving with regards to like the raid on Mar-a-Lago or any of the recent investigation stuff since the Trump administration. It's still the FBI, right? Not exactly an ally of the left, but broadly as an institution of the state, as the feds. They've been doing, it seems, a relatively upstanding job, certainly compared to what they've done in the past. I worry about fomenting any kind of opposition.
This is also like the leftist critique is that like the FBI is a institutional organization. The rights critique is that it's a biased bias, and some would probably say like Marxist like institution or something. It like this is saying the FBI is bad, but for two different universes. Like these like Marjorie Taylor Greene is working from a completely different set of history and a completely different set of context than most leftists are working from when they say FBI bad.
Position to them now in the context of how the right sees them as being, if you accept the FBI as bad broadly, you're kind of giving leeway to the right there to make invalid criticisms against their behavior when they're targeting legitimately stuff they've done.
So I think that's a perfectly legitimate argument, which is why, literally in the context of that radar, I said, part of the issue is that elites want to change institutions when they start to hold elites accountable. And that historically, the FBI and these kinds of deep state, for lack of a better word, institutions have been used to run cover for elites. And that's exactly what's happening right now. So regardless of how you feel about Mar-a-Lago, whether that was a political raid, and of course, there's all this stuff going on now with Biden and whether or not he's being treated similarly or differently, and that's a whole other quagmire. But regardless of whether you feel like Trump is being unfairly persecuted.
Well, let's be clear. Biden, as much as like it's not good that he has documents at his house. If he's turning them over, that immediately makes him a better actor than Trump. Like, both of them can do the same thing. It's very different if it's like, if you're actively trying to not turn your documents over, than somebody who is. That is a very big difference between those two.
The left knows how it feels about the FBI. And why not let the left make its claims about how the FBI should be reformed in a progressive way? If you have concerns about the right only using this issue of FBI reform as a way to insulate Donald Trump. And I find that a lot of conservatives in the rising audience, for instance, are very hostile to the idea that a powerful institution would be weaponized to defend the rich but attack the poor, or even attack the left and attack the otherwise marginal. And they are open to that argument. And they, in fact, were very receptive to that argument in the comments of that video and elsewhere online. And so, again, I wonder what you make of that. I feel like that's a legitimate point that you made and one that I addressed in the context of the radar. So why the kind of hostility about the radar in particular?
Well, because of the framing, which, to be fair, you kind of did right there, right? The Mar-a-Lago thing and the Biden thing ain't really comparable. The raid on Mar-a-Lago was because Trump had failed to comply with pre-existing demands to turn over the material. Seems like Biden just, dropped spaghetti out of his pockets and left a bunch of documents everywhere. Stupid, no defending it, but not really federal raid territory.
No, I don't think they're comparable, and that's why Biden wasn't raided. I do think that because Biden took the position when the Trump
But you did compare, like, that is the comparison that you drew.
A president to have been in this position, that I think he said something like, no one should ever be president who is so irresponsible with documents, and now here he is, obviously in the exact same situation. So I do think Biden set himself up for a number of comparisons and claims being made about his fitness because of overreaching with the Trump argument.
However, I totally get it. I'll tell you a secret. I voted for Bernie during the primaries, not Biden.
Yeah, I'm aware, but you did vote for Joe Biden during the general election, and you advocated for people to do so, which is perfectly fine. Yep. But I do believe that's another point of contention that you've had with me, that you disagreed with my hesitation to endorse Biden.
Greetings. I have no idea where Megadon is, but glad you're here.
Bernie hold out a little longer in the endorsement process until he had gotten something more in the line of concrete concessions from Joe Biden.
Yeah, I'm happy to hit to that. But with regards to the document thing, you said that the question, he went so hard on the Mar-a-Lago raid thing, Biden, and then it turns out, he's got these docs around. I agree. This is a political, falter on his part for sure. It doesn't really speak to the FBI though. I wanted to ask though, specifically, because when the cons are talking about the FBI, they're usually criticizing them for behavior I think is just and warranted, like the Mueller investigation, for all the fun and fireworks that turned out to be. In principle, I get it, much in the same way that the whole Russiagate business ended up turning up some pretty interesting info, indictments and knowledge, and how the Russian government was making a cat run out of there. Silly. The Russian government was making a good effort to, lean on the scales however they could. It seems like, at least at the moment, I don't really know what you mean when you say reforms to the FBI. What does that mean? Because when MTG says it, she means, like, don't go after cons ever. So, like, what reform are we, like, looking for here?
Well, to be frank, what MTG was advocating for was abolishing the FBI. That's what was trending. That's the phraseology that people were using, abolish the FBI. And I'm of the mind that given the historical, I believe in the radar, I mentioned that 85%, I think it was, of all FBI investigations.
Yeah, so this is the thing also. If we're only going to talk about reforming the FBI when, like, the right steps forward and wants to destroy it because they find it to be a biased institution against them, which is unfounded, then no, we should not support them, because at the end of the day, they're going to be driving the bus on that one.
Wiretapping, assassinations, all of the things that it's done have targeted the left. So on balance, do I care about the Mueller investigation or a raid in Mar-a-Lago as compared to the murder of civil rights leaders and the wiretapping of everybody from Martin Luther King to Elvis? No, I would happily abolish the FBI. So that's top level. If people are making that argument, even if it means incidentally that there are some,
I'm sorry, I'll be that person. Yeah, there is value. There is absolutely value to the FBI. I'm sorry, there just is. I like, they've done awful things and they don't have the best track record, but in 2023 there are resources that the FBI provide law enforcement and to national security interests that are good and that help and protect people. So I mean, I get it. I get not liking the FBI as a leftist, but like FBI crime stats are very useful and very reputable, along with like all the other information that they gather. Like,
personally, on balance, I'd be happy with that compromise. So that's not a compromise that needs to be made. Any number of institutions exist to investigate.
Oh, thank you. Welcome aboard.
And the like. The DOJ can continue to exist. This argument is often brought up in the context of, like, let's say abolish ICE or abolish the police.
I do like her green. I like her green cover. Maybe I should get
needs
one of
those. Of those institutions before.
I would want a
relatively
green
newer
one to match
versions
my green
existed.
X's.
And I don't think that simply asking for the substantive reform or abolishment of one institution means that everyone else gets off the hook, which is, again, why I made it clear in my radar that advocating for systemic reform for the purpose of insulating elites against criticism is absolutely the opposite of what we should do. But we should be cognizant of the fact that these institutions are designed and are put in place to do the exact opposite, to protect elites and target people who are marginalized politically or otherwise. And if the right wants, right? And if the right wants to kind of step in it by popularizing the idea of abolish the FBI, and if that movement's going to have some kind of
that's not
rhetorically or otherwise, if there's going to be a moment for that, why not have people who are much more knowledgeable than I, frankly, design the kinds of reforms that they think would actually be beneficial?
Because that's not how that's going to play out.
I had on the podcast to try to talk about what those reforms would actually be. I think it was Alex Vitale, and then I think I spoke to also Cornel West shortly after to try. So
there's also the thing, like, does Brianna Joy Gray think that knowledgeable leftists are going to be allowed into the room for that conversation? Like, is Marjorie Taylor Greene or any of the other like right-wing demagogues who are pushing this who like are pushing for an abolition of the FBI, like, does she think that like AOC or any of these people are going to be invited in to figure out, hey, how do we reform the FBI? Like, no. Like, Marjorie Taylor Greene is arguing for an abolition of the FBI as a way to victimize people of her ideology, like
to try to pin them on what they would advocate for in terms of substantive reforms to the FBI and whether they thought that this was a moment that the left should be pushing. And while I think that Cornel West did agree that this was something that we could politicize and take over if we wanted to, I think very few people were willing, or maybe just hadn't put enough thought in it because it's a new moment, and to what constructively, like, or concretely rather, that would look like. But I think it's a conversation the left should be having, right? That's a conversation go ahead.
That's my issue, right? Alex and Cornel aren't the people with their hands on the levers. The right is, or at least potentially could be,
Well, what do you mean by that?
I mean that right now, we talk about material conditions. The historical context of this discussion, abolish the FBI, this is not one in which we're having a level-minded conversation about the exact ways in which to reform the institution.
I agree, but that's exactly what I'm pushing for.
No, well, but hold on. But it ain't happening,
Right, but why isn't it happening, Vaush?
Well, this is the same issue I had with endorsing Biden. There isn't a third option. You've got exactly two in this case.
Well, there was a third option, and I know that because I voted for the third option.
Well, no,
what was the third option?
In the general election, not the primary.
Yeah, no, in the general election, I voted third party.
Right.
And did that person win or have any kind of meaningful impact on the body politic? No.
Like I said, there were two options. Two options that can happen. Well, hold on. I've never
had to go full sleeve. It's getting cold.
Well, here's a edge case that perfectly represents my virtues. You've got what you've got. In the case of the FBI,
just to be clear, I didn't vote third party because it represents my virtues. I represent third party because, practically speaking, if third parties get, I believe, to 5% of the vote percentage, they get additional funding. It makes it more possible for a third party to get ballot access and to be an actual contender and change that oppressive two-party duopoly reality that we live under today.
Is that going to change? Also, even if you got a third party to be able to get federal funding, do you think that third party is going to win a presidential election? Is that really not even speaking from pragmatism, but is that really the reasonable outcome to expect? Because you're going to end up just disappointing people when they don't even come close to that. To garner 5% of the national vote, do you know how many people that is? That's an insane number of people. Utterly insane. So no, that's unrealistic.
It's a real thing that can happen if enough people actually.
You would only do that because of your virtues.
Joe Biden in Washington D.C.
You would only do that because the actual material outcome. Like you would only do that because the material outcome is there is none, and you're doing it to feel better. You would vote third party because it feels better to not have to vote for Joe Biden, even though Joe Biden is the only materially positive vote you could have made from a leftist perspective.
Political, right, with or without my vote in Washington D.C., not even a state.
Exactly,
that is the most effective way for me to actually.
It's unrealistic. It's unrealistic.
My point here ain't about criticizing your vote. It's that only two people were going to be president, and there are only two real paths to FBI.
No. But those are two different. But Vaush, I want to be really clear here. Mm-hmm. You said there were two options. You didn't say at first there's two options for what a presidential outcome was going to be. But my vote is not connected to what I want the presidential outcome to be. There are other political realities that my vote can determine.
Gotta vote for corn pop.
FBI stuff. I would have loved a world, Vaush, where you and I were having a conversation about, gosh, you know, I know the FBI has done a lot of messed up stuff, and if there's an opening here for the elected representatives to be a part of drafting what new legislation would look like to reform the FBI,
which there wasn't,
we should be pushing for that and making sure that it's written in our image, not a right-winger's image.
Right.
But instead, now you and I are back and forth on the internet, or at least you are criticizing me on the internet for even wanting to reform the FBI, which seems to me should be a pretty obvious bedrock left.
Abolish.
I would also abolish the FBI, which should be a bedrock easy principle for left people to adopt.
Oh, I don't think
abolish the entire see, this is no.
I don't think so at all. I think the federal police are a fairly necessary institutional force, much in the same way that in their current system we need municipal police. Though obviously they are a largely harmful institution, you just can't up and abolish them. You need to take the work to put in systems that support the same basic functions and practices.
The abolition of the FBI.
Well, I think that Brianna's going too far in saying that we should.
The abolition of the FBI would
we keep getting
actually
the issue I have, and we don't even make
pretty detrimental to our
Biden or Trump or whatever.
Investigatory body.
Is that in this historical context,
capacity, I should say,
regardless of whatever paths you support, broadly or in the long term, there are two attitudes that are institutionally supported towards the FBI. One of which is the standard boilerplate, let them do what they do, Democrats, whatever, moderates. And then the Republicans who want to abolish it. The issue that I have here is that the desire, well, that's true. There's wait, please. There's no institutional support.
Well, wait, no, Brianna, you can't be like, you just said you wanted to do the abolish part. Those are the two options. You're not offering a reformist option here.
For moderate reform. There are politicians who don't want to touch the FBI.
That's a tautology.
And politicians who want to abolish it.
You are framing the argument in a limited way. You are defining two choices.
The world
and then saying,
is limited.
No. You're defining two choices and then saying there's two choices. There is, in fact, a world where our job on the left, I believe, is to create additional choices. Not to sit around in this doomer. Wait a minute. Not to sit around in this doomer zone saying, well, we can't do anything, so let's be angry. Vaush, you called me a subhuman something, like a subhuman fascist or something.
Force the vote fans and Brianna.
Yeah, wait. I thought Brianna was like, I didn't watch any. I'm not that aware of what you've said. Stuff.
Joy Gray fans
are
fucking subhuman pieces of shit.
I mean,
despicable people who are only in it for the aesthetic, for the grift.
You wrote down my insults, but I didn't write anything down. Come on, no fair.
Well, I've never mentioned you in public, Vaush. I've never said anything about you in my entire life.
That's fine. We're both public figures, and we have the right to take shots at each other at our will. But I ain't got.
But there is no this other because I haven't. But I just want to make sure you were saying right now that there are two options. I want to be really clear. I don't disagree with you when you say there is no movement on the left.
I remember watching that Cedar and her talk about force the vote. That this is exactly how that was going. This is exactly how that was going.
To abolish the FBI. In fact, that is the sum total of my criticism. Why is there no movement on the left to abolish or at least reform the FBI? Why is Marjorie Taylor...
There has always been a leftist understanding and a leftist stance of reforming the FBI. That has always been around. You can ask almost any leftist and they will tell you why they dislike the FBI. That's not something that just happened recently. That's a pretty historically and fundamental, pillar of leftist politics. This isn't something new. We didn't just stumble onto the FBI thing. We've known about this and held this opinion for a lot of the movement's time. I don't know what this is. This is somehow new. At the end of the day, this isn't what you were advocating for anyway. What Marjorie Taylor Greene is advocating for was abolition because of bias against conservatism, which is what you would sign on to if you went along with this. That's what you're signing on to. You can do the whole, but what if I introduce an argument that's a lot more reasonable? That's totally fine. But guess what? You're not driving the ship. You are following their lead on this one. You would have had to get out in front and started the whole FBI discourse stuff on your own. And when they came through, said yes, but not for your reasons. At the end of the day, we weren't leading on this issue at the time. So and regardless, Marjorie Taylor Greene and those type are going to be the people who push it forward.
Green in the context of a self-interested campaign to protect Donald Trump, the only person who's talking about reforming an institution who's raison d'etre. Or reform. If you want to reform it, let's talk about reform, Vaush. I'm 100% on board with that.
She's talking about abolition. So are you. And I asked you what reforms you make.
Well, I, Brianna Joy Gray, would. But I am not. I'm not going to die on this hill. I'm going to talk. I want in a community with people who are like-minded, Vaush, about what the best strategy forward is. I'm not interested in defending my take. It's just a take. It's just a thought. It's just an idea that I would love to develop. No, I don't want takes, Vaush. I want policy to make the left better. I want to change, make the world that we live in better. I'm not interested in scoring points on the internet. So if someone comes up to me and says,
if you want to make things better, then you need to have them be realistic. Like, realism and like actually caring about the material outcomes is, if that's what you want, if you want the world to be better, then you actually have to impact the world, not do this game of like, oh well, you know, we could maybe take the lead and maybe we could shift the conversation, maybe, who knows, possibly, even though, like, no, fuck out of here.
I have a tweak to your identity. I have a tweak to your philosophy. I have a tweak to your plan. Let's develop this in concert with other people who are much more knowledgeable than I say yes and to that, Vaush.
Okay,
I'm not interested in tearing anybody down.
I'm yes-anding you right now. So
okay,
let's dial it back, because I feel like we've rolled down a very steep hill very quickly. The point that I'm trying to make here is that there are times and places to make certain types of criticisms. Now, whether or not I even agree with the abolish the FBI bit, you know,
Mighty Joe, you have a garage.
This strikes to me as like an Andrew Tate fan screaming, you know, Andrew Tate's been arrested on accusations of sex trafficking. Let's abolish the police. He shouldn't be able to be arrested for that. And the lefty stride in saying, oh, you want to abolish the police, do you? Well, maybe that would be a good idea. Now, I understand the temptation of this argument because you're meeting them where they're at. They're interested in this thing. But the truth of the matter is, and the thing that frustrates me is, they're not actually interested in police abolition. They're interested in getting their guy off. And while you think that you're doing our side, you know, pulling people interested in getting Donald Trump off over to broader FBI abolition, I think what you're actually doing is the opposite, which is you're giving the institutional legitimacy of the left's critique of the FBI over to the far right, who just want to get Donald Trump off. And I think that's kind of iterating the fact that despite all your caveats and criticisms, MTG still quote tweeted you, touting around, oh, look at this lefty, former, you know, secretary for Bernie Sanders.
Oh, yeah, fuck. That's a good point. So yeah, like at the end of the day, like Marjorie Taylor Greene used, I do kind of remember that. Yeah, because Marjorie Taylor Greene was like, love that got attention. And I think Brianna Joy Gray was like, no, not you. But it doesn't matter. Like, you got used as a legitimizing tool, which isn't really that helpful to the left now, is it?
Even they agree the FBI has gone too far. And when they're in that mode, they'll take any stance. They'll say, dude, they killed Dr. King. They killed Fred Hampton. You know? And then they'll run with that as a
you have a nice night, Mighty Joe.
Part of their
Go clean that garage
to get their fascist wannabe dictator off investigations and charges. But I don't think it does much to support real criticism of the FBI. I think it taints criticism of the FBI because it associates them with this insane MAGA, hysteria. I think it worsens our arguments.
It also equalizes. It draws equivalency between like Dr. King and like Trump getting investigated for holding on to documents. Like, it draws this equivalency and makes people think like, oh man, like the FBI did this to Dr. King and they like raided Donald Trump. Those are two totally equal things when they're absolutely fucking not.
Because it connects us.
That's also the disrespect
to their argument.
So what arguments are the left? You mentioned that this is the wrong time. Is there a movement separate and apart from
you have a nice night, Joels,
that is at all vocalizing any interest in reforming the FBI in any way?
I don't even know what reforms we're talking about here. What are we looking to do exactly? Because I don't know if I'd agree with that. I admit the abolition thing's complicated. You can go a lot of roads with that. But in terms of reform, maybe, you know, if you could bite into something a bit more moderate, what would you do exactly? Are we talking about like more public warrant approval procedures on the part of judges, or like pullbacks on what they can do to get wiretaps on, or what would you do exactly?
I think that it's remarkable that in 20 seconds of applying yourself to considering what reforms would be beneficial to the left, you came up with two that sound really good.
I'm fine with those. The right's not, though.
But however, there's been absolutely no interest or any conversation in the least about that on the left. So here's my thought. I completely agree that Marjorie Taylor Greene and all of these right-wing figures are operating in bad faith, but they deny it, right? So what better way to demonstrate that their argument about abolishing the FBI is complete fluff that's only being used to insulate Donald Trump, one of the most elite people in the world as a former president of the United States, other than actually doing what they have not done, which is promulgating legislation from the left, for the left, that actually would be substantive reforms, the kinds of which I think would appeal to a right audience, a conservative.
No, see, that's where she's wrong. She thinks that the reforms that Vaush is talking about in those instances would interest and would motivate more right-leaning voters toward either moving them to the center or giving liberal or progressive legislators a second look, right? In her mind, she's arguing, hey, the right is not going to forward any real legislation around the FBI issue. So what if we take the reins and actually introduce legislation that will do the job of reforming the FBI? We get the credit. Their voters see that we're the ones who actually have their voters' interests in mind, right? Which is, that sounds nice. That sounds really nice, actually. But here's the problem. Neither Marjorie Taylor Greene or any of the Republican representatives in Congress will either A, give any of those progressive legislators credit nor a vote for attempting to reform the FBI. It's very much like the immigration issue. It's an issue that they're not looking to actually solve. They're looking to fundraise. They're looking to gain support around. They're looking to be as controversial as they can to puff up their donation numbers. Like, at the end of the day, and their personal support, at the end of the day, they're not really looking for reforms. They're looking for an enemy to galvanize their audience against, to basically give themselves more power. That's what they're trying to do. Marjorie Taylor Greene knows that she's not going to be able to impact the FBI's funding or their function. So what she's going to do is go out there and argue, hey, we should do the maximalist thing of abolishing the FBI, because she knows it's not going to happen. So when her voters see that and go, God damn, at least somebody's saying it, right? They give her credit, they give her votes, they give her maybe, $1 or $2 on her website, right? If AOC comes out like a week later, is like, here's our legislative docket of how we reform the FBI, and I think that Marjorie Taylor Greene and other conservatives could hop on board and support this. You know what's going to happen? They're going to say, no, actually, these are all reforms that would end up targeting conservatives, targeting Republicans. They would turn around and say that they want to create the FBI in their own image. They're going to say they want to make it Joe Biden's FBI. They're going to use every single tactic that they already used to demonize, and they're just going to use it once again to demonize progressive Congress members. There is no winning in this. You can't. Tying yourself to their extreme rhetoric will not help you outflank them, because they don't have solid grounding. They're going to move from position to position to what they need. They're not grounded in any ideological stance or position. They're going to move whatever gets them the most credit from their voters. And if they just tell their voters, no, don't be fooled, they're just they want to hop on my bandwagon of fixing the FBI, but they're secretly going to ruin it. That's all she has to say, and that's all that has to happen for any kind of leftist movement in Congress, specifically legislatively, as she mentions, to be undermined almost immediately. So no, not buying it at all.
Conservative leaning audience, even if it would miff the elected Republicans who, of course, have bad faith interests.
How would that own them, though? Wouldn't they want that? They don't like the FBI. That's just doing what they want.
Wait a minute. If the left drafts left legislation that would reform the FBI in ways
they'd never agree with it,
and the right adopts it and votes for it and passes it,
it wouldn't happen. I hate to
break it to you, but that's called a win. That's a good thing.
And that wouldn't happen. That's not going to happen, because if it's leftist at all, if there is anything in there, which again, they already say Joe Biden is a Marxist. You don't think they're just gonna say no, this is they're just trying to make the FBI more woke? You don't think they're just gonna say that and then draft their own extreme legislation, and then boom, we're in the same exact position, nothing happens with the FBI, both sides gets credit for virtue signaling? You see how nothing really changes?
Just happens.
Would it prevent the FBI from continuing their investigation into Donald Trump? Or would it be substantive reforms?
Vaush, it's drafted by the left. So no, of course not. The left, I presume, it can be whatever they want it to be. The left does silly things all the time. I'm not staking any claims here on their trustworthiness. The Democratic Party that just spent the entire last 2 years making their entire identity about 1-6 and impeaching Trump for a million, over and over and over again in 1-6 commissions and all of that, is not going to do anything that absolves Trump from responsibility, nor do I think they should, although they should have the appearance of not having a witch hunt, because I think that hurts them politically, and there's no need for any of that. If he's guilty, what he's guilty of, he's guilty of. And what he's not, he's not.
Reform is put forward that does not in any way impede the investigation of Donald Trump. It's a sensible FBI reform. The Republicans will just call it woke. They'll not vote.
Exactly.
And none of their voters.
Exactly. So here we are. This is what I believe are the two options that exist. The left puts forward good faith legislation that would address some of the legitimate concerns that are being raised by the right about the FBI, not insulate Donald Trump from criticism,
what
and
concerns?
well, the FBI has spent the last 100 years of existence growing its power and growing its reach. There is, I think, a perfectly legitimate argument about various aspects of the way that the Department of Justice and the
whoa. They also are the institution that the X-Files runs under in back in the 90s. So whoa. The FBI has some good things. The X-Files division.
FBI have focused on Donald Trump and some
like what
inequities.
Well, I thought you just said this legislation wouldn't do anything.
Well, that's my whole point. So why are you asking about that, Vaush?
Well, then why'd you just say that? You just said that, though. You were just like, okay, well, address some of the rights concerns.
I think it's fair. I think that some combination of the media's behavior and the FBI's behavior, it's obviously, even when people do bad things, they can be politically motivated in their approach. I think it's perfectly possible. I don't know, right? Like, I don't know. Wait a minute. Let me finish the sentence. You just asked me, Vaush. Let me finish the sentence. I don't know, so that's why I don't want to opine. But I'm not trying to opine on, for example, whether or not this narrative that's out there that the FBI held up the making public that Joe Biden had these outstanding documents until after the midterms because they didn't want to hurt Democrats. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not interested in promulgating that narrative. But I think that it's completely possible that there is some legitimacy in terms of the targeted nature of those attacks. If there's not, then great. Then there's nothing.
This is their narrative now.
But look, here's the point, Vaush. Ignore all of that. The point is that you get to design. You keep creating.
They're biased against Donald Trump and Martin Luther King Jr. Those are two totally equivalent figures.
Here's what's so interesting.
That's the equivalency you're going to end up drawing.
Legislation you don't like, when the reality is this is an opportunity to come up with the exact legislation you do like, for the left to be advocating for whatever it is. You don't want to abolish, I do want to abolish. Whatever you want to do is what we should be advocating for, is my belief, progressives to actually take up and run with.
The slight power that I have is over discourse, not policy.
I'm not talking about you literally, Vaush, obviously. I'm talking about what we push elected officials to do.
I understand that, but notice how the rhetoric has shifted, right? Always little bits of it pop up. What we're talking about right now, the left constructing criticisms of the FBI in the form of policy and legislation, that has nothing to do with giving the right accolades on getting a broken clock, twice as right kind of deal, on criticizing the FBI, nor on pulling people from the right over, nor on meeting some of their legitimate criticisms of the FBI, of which they have only one, by the way, which is the fact that the FBI doesn't work for them. Now we're just talking about crafting policy to reform the police. The FBI are police, after all, fundamentally, and I've always supported reforming the police in many ways. But notice how now we're talking about something reasonable, which is, hey, the federal police are, as many police institutions, rather corrupt and
I hate to break it to you, but there's a part of this community that has been talking about something reasonable the entire time. And your reluctance to participate in that is a choice, and that's completely fine. But there's some of us who have said,
like doing what Marjorie Taylor Greene wants by abolishing the FBI and giving them accolades and saying they have legitimate criticisms and saying the FBI might have been politically motivated when they have Trump. No, you slip in like these narratives here, right?
I think that
which aren't necessary when criticizing the FBI in like a formative way.
Obviously.
She was a communications lead, or what is it? Communications director? Yeah, for Bernie. So
like the FBI a lot more. Like you're not going to convince me to not want to abolish the FBI. So I don't even think we should go down that road.
See, well, then at the end of the day, all you want to do is what she wants to do, and such you're prattling about. It's meaningless. You just want to do.
Wait, I don't think I'm prattling about anything. This is my show, and I'd like you to offer me a modicum of respect here, Vaush.
We're both prattling. It's okay. It's fine. Prattling is fine. It's a free country. But
no, it's not. I think that's disrespectful. And I've been in the background of all of this.
We're both grown-ups here. It's fine.
Wait a minute, Vaush. Wait a minute. In the background of all of this,
it's getting spicy.
You are sitting here in a way that is. And the background is I've been trying to downplay. I've been trying not to emphasize what exactly your response to my radar has actually been. The reality is you called me a subhuman piece of shit as a consequence of what I think is, and you just characterized as a reasonable conversation about reforming the FBI.
I don't think I called you that over that.
Wait a minute.
That also wasn't a conversation. That's just you popping off on Twitter.
I completely respect that you don't want to abolish the FBI. I don't care. We have a difference of opinion there. I don't think it's worth calling anybody names or accusing, any ad hominem attacks. But my point is this.
God.
If all you are willing to get to, if all the place where you're comfortable is to say, wow, in this moment, it would be nice if left progressives or Democrats in Congress We're advocating for the kinds of reforms that they think are valuable in this moment to provide a meaningful contrast to the kind of self-interested, elite-protecting reforms that Marjorie Taylor Greene is going for. Wow, I should advocate for that. And to the extent that I think that Breonna is not advocating for that, I can say, well, I think that Breonna needs to have a more focused message. I think that Breonna is going too far, but I would advocate for this. And it is frustrating to me. I do agree with Breonna that it's frustrating to me that the left Congress members have nothing to say about any of this when they spent years talking about defunding the police, defunding ICE, and having this institutional critique. Where are they in this moment?
Well, I'm not saying
but that's not what happens. Yeah, what are you saying?
Well, defund the police, let's be very, very clear, was not a great rallying cry. So there's also that aspect, and that abolish the police like slogan and narrative, and kind of the way some people decided to just not really what's the word I'm looking for, respond with what they meant by that, and not have any nuanced takes about it, is why abolish the police was as unpopular as it was. Abolishing police forces around the United States would be not good. There are a lot of really great reforms. I believe in Minnesota, although I could be wrong about the state, or about the city, I should say. But I believe in Minnesota, they reformed their police force to kind of reorganize where police officers would patrol, basically based on where they live. And they also did that in terms of hiring. So they made sure that police were policing the neighborhoods they live in, and not living in the suburbs on the other side of town and then driving into, like, you know, kind of some of the bad areas or some of the more poor neighborhoods, and then policing a bunch of poor people that they're going to naturally, from a class standpoint, look down upon. So there are a lot of great reforms that you can do with the reorganization of police in the United States. None of them are this weird, are just saying abolish the police. I'm sorry, but the abolish the police stuff just didn't work messaging wise. It just didn't. I don't know what to tell you on that one.
Well, I'm saying at the end of the day, you can dress it up as much as you want, but a fascist said that she wants to get rid of investigative body that's investigating her corrupt dictator pick. And your answer to that was yes, but for woke reasons. And that
not wrong. At the end of the day, she's trying to argue that, hey, we both agree that the FBI should be abolished. But here's my good faith, real substantive reasons to all the right-leaning people. Don't you, here's some good substantive reasons of why we should abolish the FBI, which I don't know if it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of Marjorie Taylor Greene's audience. I'm not sure where Breonna gets this from, but at the end of the day, Marjorie Taylor Greene's voters and the people who I think Breonna thinks she would be talking to are not going to be interested in leftist reform of the FBI. They're just not. They're just not. They don't like the FBI, not because it attacked Martin Luther King Jr., not because they targeted MLK. They like that part. Not because they targeted Fred Hampton. They liked that part. The only part they don't like is that they went after Trump. That's it. That's literally it. They just want Trump off. That's all they want. They want Trump off. They want they want the Jan 6 guys off. They want all their guys off. And they will use people like Breonna Joy Gray, who have real substantive critiques of the FBI, to buttress their point and give them legitimacy. Now, I can understand Breonna Joy Gray is hey, but I'm right. What if we make the argument? Which is fair, but you've got to understand where your window to make an argument is and isn't. It's not when Marjorie Taylor Greene and the rest are arguing for abolition, and it's not when they're about to take power after the midterms. These are not the moments for these reforms, because they're going to end up just getting hijacked by people who don't want to do your reforms, people who have something a lot more nefarious on their mind.
framing will always be something that I take issue with. It doesn't matter how sincere
the moment is important.
Criticisms are. There are times when you have to understand that the material course of history is guiding your country in a direction where you're going to have to focus on other priorities. Like, it's with the police thing, right? We're in a very dangerous position in this country right now. Democracy might not last here. You know, nobody can see the future, but it seems like Republicans are pretty openly anti-democracy at this point. They've been working hard to get rid of it on whatever level.
They've always kind of been.
And
there's always been a strain of anti-democracy in the Republican Party.
If it's reasonable, but the narratives addressing the right's reasonable criticisms, they have only one, and it's that the FBI don't work for them. You know, oh, Marjorie Taylor Greene happened to be right on this one. No, she wasn't. She doesn't give a shit about what the FBI has done. Neither do any of her followers. You're not going to own any of them.
Because what's she right about? She's right about the outcome?
Well, I disagree with that. I disagree with that, Vaush. I think that I know for a fact that many of her followers actually do agree with me. I know for a fact.
When you say abolish the FBI, the exact thing that she said.
Yeah, I know for a fact that many of her followers agree with me on two important points. That the FBI is an institution with an enormous power that has been used poorly to target people who are historically vulnerable, including people like them because they're low income and things like that.
Okay. That, yeah, if you frame it that broadly, then anybody can agree with that. Okay.
And additionally, I think that they agree that it should not be an institution that exclusively protects elites. And I think that that's a good place to work from. And
No. But again, that's not what Marjorie Taylor Greene would do. She would protect her elites. This is a power grab. You're aiding a power grab here.
A much more useful place.
Their framing
sitting around
is totally conservative.
Wait a minute. Let's talk about your framing, Vaush, because you just accused me of wanting to do what Marjorie Taylor Greene wants. But
by your words, you both wanted to abolish the FBI.
If I could just finish the sentence. You accused me of doing. You just said that you want to do. I want to do what Marjorie Taylor Greene wants to do. But
you both want the same outcome.
So I want to ask you.
Different reasons, same outcome.
Not wanting civil rights leaders, of not wanting Fred Hampton to be murdered, woke.
Can you go back in time and keep him from being murdered? Because if so, goddamn.
Is that what you think that I'm advocating for? Or could there be some prospective value in protecting people who are oppositional to the government and making sure that the FBI's powers are restrained?
The Republicans will not do this. The Republicans have no interest in restraining the power of the FBI other than curtailing it and using it for their own.
This is such an important point. I think that is actually what defines why there are these two halves of the left that exist right now. There is one half of the left that I think is really exemplified by the statement.
And here we go. So this is going to be the real leftists, not real leftists, helpful leftists, not helpful leftists, whatever. This is going to be the wedge of which kind of leftist are you? Are you a institutionalist? Are you a real challenger to power? Like now we're gonna get into who's really the real leftist here. Yeah.
That you just made, which is that the right won't do this. Or sometimes you'll say things like Democrats won't do this. And the entire political discourse is limited by what you believe the pre-existing actors in place are willing to do, which means at no point is there any conversation, even in loose, ridiculous kind of podcasty formats, at no point in academic spaces and political spaces and media spaces, is there any place to germinate ideas that have the power to actually...
Wait, that's not true. That's not true. Educational spaces are absolutely there. That's not true. It is only in these very high, and let's be clear, Brianna Joy Gray is not a small podcaster. Brianna Joy Gray was the press secretary, communications director? One of those two things, because my brain is starting to melt trying to remember her credentials. But she was somewhere in the communications realm for Bernie Sanders, which should tell you, I think it might have been press secretary. But either way, understand, she's not some small podcaster. She has access to people with real power in this country, meaning she is probably talking to some of these people about these topics. So I don't know what this we just want some ideas, which you can find these ideas on podcasts, on YouTube shows, on all of these places. But when we're talking about material legislative maneuvering, that's real, what you want to see in real life. That's not germinating. That's hey, you should be doing this action. And also, again, with Force the Vote, we're looking at somebody who's used a movement, used a strategy to galvanize people against leftist legislators, has done actual damage to them through her activism.
In any way.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really destructive. And you don't have to agree.
No, there is. But you don't got to jump on a fascist trying to protect their strongman in order to make those points. Because all you're doing is legitimizing and giving left approval credence to them. Same thing Donald Trump did back in 2015, by the way, talked about how the DNC was screwing over Bernie. That wasn't him, and some lefties blocked.
Oh, actually, I just thought about this. This is another really good example of this, I think, is AOC and Ted Cruz. I remember, like, they both agreed on, I don't remember what it, like, we'll just say mailing, they both agreed on, like, mailing puppies to all Americans who aren't allergic to them, right? And, like, the reasoning behind this, like, again, I don't remember what the topic was. So we'll just go with this one. But, like, they both agreed on this. And Ted Cruz, I guess, reached out to AOC on Twitter to be like, hey, we agree on this, on, like, mailing puppies to all people in the U.S. who don't have allergies to dogs. But I would like to slip in like a Glock 17 Gen 4 with their dog so that they can protect their home. And AOC did like the classic, like, no, actually, I don't want your help on this one. Please excuse yourself from getting in on this. And that's what we should be doing. I know people looked at that and were like, oh, why don't you, like, work with the Republican, take the win. I think I saw some people talking about this. And it comes down to, we can agree on, like, problems, but if we can't agree as to why these problems are happening or on the solution, I'm sorry. That's backwards. We can sometimes agree on, like, solutions, but if we have a real disagreement on like how we got there, then we have a real problem here. Like, there is a real issue with that. Both groups, both parties have to go in to the problems that face the US with the same understanding of where we are in the world. And Marjorie Taylor Greene and Breonna Joy Gray do not do that, but they both come to the same outcome of, like, what if we just got rid of the FBI? And, like, we just get rid of it. It's not going to bring Fred Hampton back. It's not going to bring MLK back. But hey, guess who does get to get off? Donald Trump. And guess who doesn't get investigated? White supremacy groups. So, like, like, what's the actual outcome here?
Really criticizing the corruption of the DNC. That was him, trying to, get a bite of lefty legitimacy as a maverick who could criticize.
I love that example, Vaush, because the man
always shut down the right wing.
The man became president of the United States of America because that message resonated, rightly or wrongly, bad,
piggyback on your real criticism.
Corruption in the political
but they're fake bullshit criticism.
It's a reverse situation, Vaush. It's me saying to a conservative audience, hey, there's some legitimacy. Yes, I believe there's some legitimacy to your concerns here. Just like we opened this conversation talking about.
No, there isn't, because their concern is that Donald Trump is being targeted.
Just like we opened this conversation talking about how there's legitimacy.
Their concern is conservative bias.
Who have moved to the right
not
because they feel
anything
like the social
else.
Contract has failed them. They don't have a place in society anymore. They have leaned into a kind of misogyny because they don't have traditional gender roles to conform to and feel lost and lonely. I don't think the misogyny is okay. I don't think Andrew Tate is okay. I don't think rape is okay. I don't think any of that is okay. But there's an underlying there.
I don't open that discourse by looking at Andrew Tate going on about how he thinks society has failed men because you can't rape women for free anymore, and go, hey, he's right on this. Not about all of it, mind you, but he is correct in that society has failed men.
Well,
and you take it from there.
I don't know
what you're doing. I agree. You have to reach these people where they are.
Stay there.
Take their bad faith message and go.
Stay there. Stay there for a second. Stay there. I don't know what Andrew Tate has said. I've never listened to Andrew Tate speaking.
I got in the ballpark.
But if Andrew Tate has said something,
have you seriously not heard Andrew? Even I've heard Andrew Tate speaking. Come on.
Like a sentence like. I don't think there's.
I don't like this.
Anymore.
I live in like a fucking titanium bubble.
Everything that Andrew Tate stands for. I think that he's normalizing rape and violence against women, and that's disgusting, and he'll probably be criminally liable for it. However, of course, it's true to your audience, and then including people who are like 13 years old, that there is a kind of a crisis of masculinity happening, and I think there are some interesting solutions over here on the left. Why don't you come join me and talk about them?
But your solution
that's absolutely
is the same
legitimate.
as Marjorie Taylor Greene's solution: abolish the FBI.
I'm a little confused, Vaush, because
you're doing her work for her, right?
I don't know how many times I can say this because
do you want to abolish the FBI or not?
I, Breonna Joy Gray, think that that's a perfectly legitimate solution. One that, by the way,
that would be a yes.
I could be moved on with people who are knowledgeable about what parts of the institution should stay in place, what preserve a certain function that I might agree is useful.
It's not what Marjorie Taylor Greene's arguing. It's all or nothing,
etc. Because I claim to be no expert on the entire workings of the FBI as an institution.
That's fine. It's complicated.
But it almost doesn't matter, because what I have said to you now repeatedly is that whatever version of FBI reform that you support, right? Because abolish the police, there's a whole lot of things in there that a lot of different people believe. Some people think it's not really abolishment if you're replacing it with this other institution that you can call the police or not call the police, but has a very different function and different funding and different framing and all of those kinds of things. But the point is, this was an opportunity for substantial reform, whether or not you want it to be quote unquote abolished or not.
It's not an opportunity for substantial reform.
And it was an opportunity for liberals, leftists, whomever in Congress who were elected to call Marjorie Taylor Greene's bluff and say, this is actually populist legislation that protects vulnerable people against the overreaches of the government. This is what you're purporting to want. And if you actually believe in it, sign on to this legislation. And when she does it.
Right. And she just says that, no, if you introduce it, it's woke.
We gotta get to the heart of this.
No, and when she doesn't, please. I'm like 6 words away from the end of this sentence.
Okay, you're 6. Okay, we're at the end. Okay, what's the goal?
And when she doesn't, that's the opportunity to call her bluff.
Okay, you can't call their bluff. We've been doing this for decades.
We literally haven't.
The Republican, no, you will. The Democrats
yeah, what's the bluff?
They don't. No, they haven't.
No, they have.
Like, what? The Republicans don't have standards. I'm sorry, they just don't. Their voters don't have standards for them. So I don't know what this is, where it's like, no, like we call them and we embarrass him, and now their voters are thinking like, huh, why did Marjorie Taylor Greene not sign on to reforming the FBI? Huh? And then guess what happens? She just says that the reforms are woke, and then we're done. And then, like, that's it. She's outflanked you in literally one move. It's like, I'm sorry, it's just not.
The Republicans will talk about any manner of emboldening or empowering the American people, or helping the American people get more change in their pockets, or lowering taxes, or anything. And every single time the Democrats do anything that would objectively improve the lives of the working class, the Republicans go, this is woke, and don't pass it. Oh, any climate change reform? That's woke. Anything having to do with green energy?
Yeah, they've already, they've already programmed their audience.
Healthcare or anything? That's woke. Toss it out. There is no calling
to reject anything.
While they may say they care
if they
about
just
the
say
FBI
it's woke.
exercising power over the weak, internally they have a consistent message: was they want power and they want to kill you. You, of course, being whatever marginalized group is on the table these days, probably not me. The idea that you can
I think that you're wrong about that, but I'll just put it in that let you finish. Go ahead.
You can't call their bluff on this. It doesn't serve any point. The only thing you're doing is listening to a fascist trying to embolden her political strategy for removing democracy and all the barriers that prevent her from doing so, and going, yes, I think that she's right on this point, and then you propose a solution identical to hers. And
wait,
then
wait,
and then
the solution is not identical to hers. How many times are you going to say that straw man?
Other caveat. Now we're interrupting both ways. And the reform version, the more let's introduce the discourse here, you still frame as addressing some of Republicans' legitimate concerns. They have none. They have none. The Republicans are uniformly against any kind of power being taken away from authoritative institutions. They will back anything that can be done to empower the police, anything that can be done to empower the FBI, the DOJ, or the CIA.
I'm sorry, it's not true.
As long as they're in charge. And when they have the power to take over those institutions, like Donald Trump tried to.
I feel like Brianna Joy Gray, and I know her podcast is called Bad Faith, but I definitely feel like she approaches Republican voters with a lot of charitability that I don't think they've earned. I know a lot of times that I know a lot of YouTubers or commentators will try not to implicate voters in with the party that they vote for, and all the and try not to kind of tie those two groups together to a point. But I'm sorry, since I was born in the early 90s, my entire life this party has been supported by a rabid base that they have done a good job at programming to hate anything that is left of center, anything at all. Liberal is an insult to these people. And people will say that's tribal, that's tribalism talking, and to a degree they would be right. But I have no problem in saying that the Republican voters that we are now living with are not these good faith, thoughtful, they've really done the reading, they've done the homework. Their leaders have already told them that every institution that gives them information hates them, is biased against them, wants them to what's the word? Wants them to never speak about anything. They're told every day that every platform they're on hates them. So do you think you're going to convince those people that you don't hate them because you offer some legislation that they maybe mildly agree with but can immediately be turned on, like at the switch of hearing the word woke? Even normal people don't like will use woke as a pejorative. And I've asked normal people at parties, at bars, what do you mean when you say woke? And most of the time, they can't even fucking explain it. And these aren't people who are political or right-leaning. Their messaging has gone so much farther and seeped so much deeper into the American lexicon. I think it's irresponsible to not recognize this and continue to do this like, oh, but if we like come to the table with like good faith criticism and the rest and good points and we validate some of their concerns, I'm sorry. We are kind of past the point where the left is going to get credit for literally anything because we legitimize some right-wing concerns. Their right-wing concerns are pretty much you're not convicting trans people, you're letting drag shows happen anywhere in America, and I don't know, woke this, woke that. Like that's all they need. The bar's not very high for them. Like the best thing you could be doing is galvanizing your side. Because is there that much pullover space? Is there that much of a reach anymore from a national, on a national platform, like from Congress? Are you going to be able to pull over moderates like that? Or not even moderates, I can't even say that. Just Republican Party voters. Even Republican Party voters are that's what they are. Very few times you see crossover Republican Party voters. Very few times. So, I mean, I don't know. I just feel like she's not, admittedly, I feel like she's not acknowledging reality. There's a part of it just being like, well, I want to speak to these people's concerns. It's like, sure, but like, you never need to legitimize their movement leaders because their movement leaders are who they're following. You have to be careful in not legitimizing their leaders.
By firing Mueller or firing the directors and putting his own cronies in charge, the way the DOJ, I forget it was Barr, tried to get sedition charges being brought to Black Lives Matter protesters. They don't give a shit about federal power being used to cripple the little guy, as long as they're the ones doing it. And all we're doing is giving legitimacy to their lies.
Also, they don't mind if it's the little guy, if it's trans people, if it's gay people. They're okay with those little guys getting stomped on. It's only good white Americans that they don't like being targeted.
And they don't care.
So I said this at the beginning, and I would just like to say this again. And I hope that we don't have to keep going back to this point. There is a difference between Republican voters, regular conservative people to whom these arguments appeal, and elected conservatives. There's no need to debate what elected conservatives in a position of power, what their investments in preserving their own power. Everybody agrees about this. Just like we don't have to go round and round and round about whether or not Marjorie Taylor Greene was a good faith or bad faith actor. As I said repeatedly in my radar, despite you in your response to my radar accusing me of being credulous and taking her at face value, I don't know how many times I can say it. This isn't about Marjorie Taylor Greene. This isn't about convincing elected Republicans. This isn't about any of that.
Voters
it's about it's the fact that regular people on the ground feel differently about this. And I'm sorry, like this is maybe just a difference of opinion, but my interactions with and real world understanding of the political smorgasbord that is the political diversity of this country and the random groups of beliefs that end up in any one given person who then identifies as conservative or liberal or somewhere in between. It's just not that neat and it's not that clean. And maybe we'll just disagree about this because we have different experiences in the world and of humanity. But I know for a fact that there are people who have a good faith interest in a lot of things, including a good faith concern about the IRS targeting working class people, which is a true thing that happens, even though I think that abolishing the IRS does in the same way that abolishing the FBI potentially could if there weren't other prongs of the Justice Department, et cetera, to hold Trump accountable, end up letting millionaires and billionaires off the hook from getting audited and taxed at all, right? So I think that people, even though conservatives are weaponizing this IRS thing to try to, yes, insulate rich people from getting audits, it's good to say, hey, I hear you when you say you're concerned that the IRS has historically targeted the poor. I hear you when you say that this is a legitimate concern, and it is a legitimate concern. But if you don't meet people there, if you don't acknowledge that there's a core of something there, they have no reason to trust you politically. And maybe your interest is in convincing people and changing anybody's mind, and maybe my political project and trying to do so is ultimately a futile one. But I can't see that. I do not believe that there's more utility sitting in these media spaces, talking endlessly about what can't be done while the world burns, because a lot of people can't afford to extend the status quo in this way. And some of us want to just try things and throw things at the wall and see what sticks. And you said, I'm sorry, the one last point of what you said, just really quickly. You said that offering, again, you keep saying the same thing as Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't care what you put in this legislation, but you cannot, you argue that
you probably should, though. That's like kind of the thing. You should really care what they put in that legislation.
The left calls, or liberals, whatever, the broad left calls Republicans on their shit all the time. It literally doesn't happen because Democrats never put forward clean bills advocating for populist policies. They never do it. We saw this happen with the $15 minimum wage.
Ah, yes,
where
populism.
It was part of a must-pass bill. Democrats intentionally took it out so that it could be killed. It was a 51 bill, right? It was part of the COVID reconciliation package. Schumer took it out, didn't have to, but took it out on the advice of the parliamentarian, which is advisory. So then it was subject to a 60 vote margin and could be voted down by Marjorie Taylor Greene and, not Marjorie Taylor Greene, Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. Right?
Yes.
Over and over again. They will never have a standalone bill on things that they know are overwhelmingly popular and they'll make them look bad. They just won't. They bifurcated the bill back better. They do this over and over again. So we never get these clean demonstrations of Republicans are against XYZ. Look at how Bernie has to run around defending that he voted for the crime bill because it had the Violence Against Women's Act in it. That's what they do. In fact, that's what Democrats always do to provide cover for the fact that they are not actually.
Yes, because Democrats are funded by the same interests that Republicans are. Democrats, especially corporate Democrats, like like Schumer, like Pelosi, like Biden, like Sinema, like Manchin, like a lot of these people are controlled opposition. At the end of the day, they're given less funding. They are chosen specifically because they are weak and have a weak constitution in terms of challenging conservative worldviews. That's why they're in the position that they're in, for those specific reasons. They are ideologically corrupt. So, I mean, if you want to talk about that, then you need to run against those people and you need to challenge them in primaries, which, it would be really helpful if the progressive movement wasn't constantly creating, litmus tests for people to constantly fail and then undermine their ability to galvanize support. It's very difficult to do so, to grow a movement from inside a party when that small movement constantly is infighting. Now, I know that Breonna Joy Gray is going to sit here and probably be like, well, I just think that progressives need to be more of this or need to be more of that, which that's fair. That's fair. But we have to stop creating litmus tests and we have to stop using them to undermine, or at the very least, using them in a way that ends up undermining their support. I'm sorry. This is one of those reasons why the Freedom Caucus is effective and large, and the Progressive Caucus, in so much that it's actually progressive, are the absolute opposite of those two things. Because there's constantly infighting, there's constantly the depowering of our own side.
A populist or worker-centered party in the least, and they actually want substantially the same kinds of economic policy that the Republicans want. They just wanted to be a little bit nicer to the gays and the blacks and the immigrants.
Not substantially the same when Republicans are calling for the abolition of the IRS, but I do agree that they're closer to the middle than a lot of people want to acknowledge. I'm not making an argument for the efficacy of the Democratic Party here. I'm only saying that you can take a pretty clean look at what the Republicans or, McConnell failed the table or what they've shot down in the Senate or the House or whatever. It's pretty obvious that Republicans, just in terms of their policy prescriptions, once they get in office, are evil and want bad things. That sounds like a sort of childlike simplicity, but it's actually the God's honest truth. Fake complexity is as misleading as fake simplicity. They will vote against things that are objectively good for the American people over and over and over again. It doesn't seem to affect their voters' opinions of them that much. Now, I believe you can pull people over, by the way. You said you want to, build a project and reaching out to people, and that the complex variety of their positions make a more, unique and fractured voter than what might be seen just by how people vote. And I agree with that. People are very complicated. The issue I have is that there's a critical difference between the situations we're talking about here. When it comes to the concerns of a voter, reaching out to them, taking their bad idea, like abolishing the IRS, and saying, "Hey, listen,
I don't think it's a bad idea. But if you want to call it not abolishing the IRS, if you want to call it reform the IRS, can we please just stick with that? If you think that because it's not the same thing.
Wait. I gotta finish. Wait, abolishing the IRS would absolutely be a bad idea. We have no systems in place.
I'm sorry. I thought we were still talking about the FBI. I'm sorry.
No. Sorry, the FBI, but also more so the IRS. Okay, the IRS. Whew, yeah, no, okay. But anyway, you take a Republican who wants to abolish the IRS. I think you can walk up to them. I think you can go, okay, listen, I got you, buddy. Okay, but we got to talk about this. Spin it off in some way. I think that's okay. The issue I have is who you do it to, on what specific issues, and how you sell it. MTG, I think, is a no-go. I wouldn't agree with her on literally anything that she said, did, or believed that I thought benefited her agenda, because her agenda is oblivion.
Well, you agree with her on one thing. You agree with her about being anti-force the vote.
I mean, we both drink water, I guess. Sure. Wait, was she? Oh, that's right. Because she was one of the people who was consistent about. Yeah. So we got water, sky is blue, in that. And
wait a minute. But why is it that it's like water, sky is blue when it's something like that? But to me, obviously, wanting to dramatically limit the powers of an arm of the police state is a no-brainer consideration. The fact that me and Marjorie Taylor Greene are both interested in curbing government power is.
She's not. Let me rephrase.
Yeah, because she's not. She's like, no. I don't think you understand. I don't want the police to not be powerful. I want the police to be powerful in going after, I don't know, fucking trans brunches or like drag brunches and gay school teachers. Those are the things she wants them to be powerful for.
Let me rephrase. That she's saying she's interested in curbing government power is an opportunity for, like, I don't understand why you think that it's like you're talking as though MTG has the ability to write whatever legislation Democrats put forward. That's the opposite of what I'm saying. If she wants to open this broad category of FBI reform, she wants to open that Pandora's box. She's able to do so, frankly, because she knows that the Democrats are too feckless to actually call her bluff and do anything about it.
Nobody cares. The FBI, nobody cares about the FBI.
Well, you don't maybe care about that. No. You don't care about the FBI.
No. The average American does not care about it. It's not like a key voters issue. Police reform is way more up there, and even that just gets towered over by other
But they're not doing that either, Vaush. That's the whole point. That's what's so embarrassing about this whole fiasco. That we had the largest number of people in the streets in a protest movement in American history 2 years ago, to which the Democratic nominee responded, "We need more funding for more cops."
Yeah, I agree.
We won
we
anyway.
live in a hell world. I completely agree. We're all
why
dying.
do we live in a hell world? Vaush, why is there no accountability?
Listen, I like
Biden did that, and you told people to go vote for Biden without any condition.
Yes, because there are two candidates who can win, and one is worse than the other. There are two states. The FBI.
I've heard this like accountability nonsense, and it's like, well, no, but you can hold like Biden accountable by like not voting for him, which is like, really, how's Biden going to be held accountable? He's not going to be president. He's going to fuck off back to Delaware. And since he's rich, if anything happens in the US, he's just going to flee the country. Whereas most normal people, they don't vote for Biden. Trump gets into power. Lord knows what the fuck happens. Especially now, think about where we are. I want you to think about, like, if we were living in a Trump administration right now, what do you think the impact would be of what is a woman? Honestly, what is a woman? Matt Walsh's very bad, but very influential a documentary that got a lot of attention, and that has literally, as somebody said earlier in chat, resulted in a children's hospital being evacuated. And do you think that Donald Trump wouldn't have seized on that as president? Do you think drag shows would even be legal right now? Think about how many trans laws and how many anti-abortion laws have been passed. Or let me rephrase it. How many anti-abortion laws have been passed throughout the states, A, and B, how many anti-LGBT laws have been proposed throughout the states as well? Do you think Donald Trump, that would have just happened and he would have just sat there? Or do you think they would have seized upon that? Do you think those would be more or less likely to pass in a Trump administration, in a second Trump administration? See, this is the thing, like, allowing the ability for these people to gain power, you have to consider the place we're in right now. They would have only compounded the damage that they've done so far. What is a woman would have probably gotten bigger, probably would have had even more discourse about it. Lord knows somebody might have written legislation after it. Fuck, Trump might have signed an executive order after watching it. These things have consequences. You can vote for a third party and feel really nice and feel like you're fighting back against the party that's not doing enough. But guess what? You're just gonna sink in the same fucking ship that they are. The only difference is you're gonna do it with your arms crossed. Now you can either make it across the body of water you're going, or you can keep complaining. Like, these are your options. At the end of the day, Vaush is right in this sense, in that there are only two realistic options. It'd be one thing if we were staring down a truly strong third-party candidate. That would be one thing. But we didn't, and we aren't. There has not been a third-party candidate to successfully run a presidential campaign since his name escapes me right now, but I believe it was during the which fucking race was that? Might have been in the 60s. It's been a while. Actually, no, wait. You know what? Let's educate ourselves very quickly. Third party runs for president. List of third party performances in the United States. Here we go. Jesus. 96. Okay. Oh my God. Is it seriously 1996? No fucking way. Other third party candidates, 1788. Okay, list includes third party candidate, less than 10%, 1% of the vote. Yeah, can I get, like, let's see. Joe Jorgensen, Jill Stein, hardly over 1%. Gary Johnson, actually 3%, not bad. Was it Nader? Was like the, let's see, the last, yeah. The closest we've gotten was, fucking Christ, Eugene Debs in 1920 was the closest percent-wise. Percentage of votes, percentage on the ballot. Jesus Christ. You have a nice night, Joels. Yeah. So when I say, like, that's not a realistic option, this is what I mean. The closest we've gotten for a percentage here is since 1920 is 3.4%. Since then, I think, like, what, 4 instances over 2%. One of them at 3.28, which was Gary Johnson, which also was split between him and Jill Stein. Even if you combine them, not hitting 5%. So I'm sorry, but third party is just not. It's not viable. It's just not. I know it sucks. It sucks that it's not viable, but it's just not viable right now. And the way you make it viable, if you want to hear the actual way you make it viable, is you have an incredibly strong Democratic candidate, and then you have an incredibly weak Republican candidate because you've your candidate hopefully smeared them across the pavement because they were such a shit nominee, and then you can have a safe third-party candidate from the left, but only under that circumstance, and we're not there.
2 states the FBI can exist in right now.
Let me ask you this.
Wait, please. There are only 2 states in which it can exist right now as represented by the interests of people currently in power.
That's not true.
No. That is. Wait, who is fronting a public, like, support for FBI reform?
Nobody, that's my point! That's my point! That's the problem! That's the very problem!
So wait, so you're agreeing with me then? Based on who is currently in power, there are 2 possible things that we can do with the FBI.
No, I'm not agreeing with you.
Stop. You just agreed with me.
I'm advocating. No, I'm not. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. Exactly. I'm advocating for a third opportunity, a third option. That's my job.
This is kind of a shit show, isn't it?
The current situation, that would imply that an unchanged situation, aka what we exist in now, is one with 2 options as represented by the interests of people.
No, there's by that definition, there's only one.
Vaush is unfortunately falling victim to doing this for 2. I'm not sure why. Vaush, this. I don't know, like 2. Not 2. That's 3. That's 3. Tres iglesias. Christ above.
One option, because there was only one party advocating anything, which is Marjorie Taylor Greene. So by your metric, there's only one thing out there.
As an option.
Fine.
So then that's it. We have that and we have this.
No, Vaush, this is so ridiculous.
No, you can change it. You can get 3, but right now there are 2.
No.
You agree with me.
No.
Right now there are 2. You can fight for
Vaush,
3. Right.
Who cares? I am fighting for 3.
That was 3 to 3.
People to
That was 3 and then 3.
Because you're too afraid to advocate for anything in the world that's real.
We're almost there. You are tying.
No, it's not real. That's the thing.
You are tying option number 3 to the insane bad faith fascist.
No, I'm
Why?
not.
No,
I'm not.
No, BJG.
Okay, I'll explain it to you.
No,
I'll explain it to you real slow. Let me answer your question. You just asked me why.
Wait, please. We have 2 institutional options right now, okay? We have 2 parties, if we may. We have the MAGA group and we have Democrats and moderates broadly. The MAGA group are composed entirely of fascists and people who want to abolish our democracy. And the moderate-leaning Republicans, the moderates and the Democrats are some neutral flavor of law and order to maybe mild reform of the police. Why would you hinge any reform of the FBI to the fascists and not to the legitimate concerns of people who are arguing against police brutality? If you wanted to reach out to people who want to reform the FBI, don't reach out to MAGA voters, reach out to liberals. They were the ones out there on the streets protesting against police brutality, ineffectively, I might add, because we live in a hell world. But if you're going to tie FBI reform to some kind of optical or political front or movement, why would you do it to the worst people with the worst intentions rather than the not worst people with the not worst intentions? This is the issue that I have. Our power is in our voice. Our legitimacy conveys strength to broader public fronts. Marjorie Taylor Greene runs the strain, not you, or Donald Trump technically does.
So you can use words like hinge and tie and do what you want. But I think most people understand.
Articles like and 2.
I think that most people understand. My audience has no cognitive difficulty in processing, exploiting a opportunity rhetorically in the political
audiences
field.
Have cognitive difficulties. Trust me, I have one.
My audience gets it. My audience, there's nobody who didn't already have a bad faith. There's nobody in my audience who didn't already have a bad faith perspective of me, who's gotten a lot of clicks and views out of calling me every name in the book and criticizing every word out of my mouth, frankly. Unless you already had an inclination to think the worst of me, nobody who heard me say, Marjorie Taylor Greene is an utter fool, but she's opened the door to something that is legitimate, which is that the FBI needs to be abolished. Let's say substantive reform, since that's a sticking point for you, and we disagree on that issue. Jesus Christ, dude, come on! Let me just finish this sentence.
It's like saying the Nazis opened the door to anarchism because they abolished the Wehrmacht government, you know?
Do you think it's appropriate to continually compare Marjorie Taylor Greene, one elected representative of the United States of America, to the Nazi regime that killed 6 million plus
Yes, because she's a Nazi. Yes.
Jews and however many tens of millions of Russians.
Absolutely. The fact that you don't think that's appropriate is insane to me. Like, genuinely unhinged.
Okay. I think that's pretty disrespectful to millions of dead people and real life consequences, but we don't have to go down that road. I think,
tragic, I'm sure.
I think it's rhetorical.
You'll just drop a shoe at the door and then leave it.
I think it's rhetorically, I think there's a reason why Goodwin's Law is what it is. It's rhetorically, I think, weak to constantly have to shoehorn Nazis into every argument to make your point. I don't think that either of us needs to do that.
They're fascists. It's a perfectly valid comparison, especially since in this case, Marjorie Taylor Greene also wants to abolish a federal institution that she's just using as a bulwark to achieve power, but other people might misinterpret.
85% of what the FBI has done is to crush people like me, people who are black, people who are left, people who are communist. But I know that she doesn't care, Vaush. Why did you keep saying that to me? I know she doesn't care.
Why do you keep bringing it up?
Wait a minute. I know she doesn't care.
Historically, the Weimar Republic had done so many bad things. Do you think that made it more justifiable when the Nazis said they wanted to abolish it in favor of putting Hitler as the emperor?
So the argument is...
No, wait, can you answer that? The Weimar Republic had done like mostly bad things. It was a government in
the argument is that if the left...
early 20th century.
The argument is that if the left wants to make it... If the right wants...
I love how people tend to like always get really, really defensive and really like offended whenever Vaush does the Nazi comparisons. I do think that it's like... The thing about always comparing everything to Nazis, here's the secret. Here's the secret, I think. The reason why you from a political rhetoric standpoint, you compare a lot of these movements and people to the Nazis is for expediency and shorthand. Because everybody knows A, the Nazis are bad, and B, why the Nazis are bad. For the most part. Obviously there are some gradations there. But you want to draw an equivalency between, as an example, Marjorie Taylor Greene, her politics, and the politics of the Nazis, because everyone understands that, whoa, that must mean that they're pretty bad. Now, also, you're drawing the Nazi comparisons because you're also using Nazi as a euphemism also for fascist, which is fine. They are fascists, but that is the prime reason why you would make that comparison. It's the most expedient way to get somebody to understand what argument you're making about somebody. Also, it's just, like I said, it's also just kind of fun.
To make a claim like the police are bad. This is what was happening at the moment. After years of criticizing the left and calling everybody Antifa and flying Blue Lives Matter flags. Between 1-6 in this moment, there has been a really interesting shift and realignment inside the Republican Party.
They're all still pro-law and order.
They're not.
They are. They all. If you take a look at what motivates Republican voters and which candidates tend to win in the midterms, law and order rhetoric, cracking down on the BLM protesters, Antifa.
They're not all still law and order.
No, they're anti the Capitol Police and FBI.
Wait a minute.
Wait.
I am not making a claim that now all Republicans hate the police. I'm not making the claim that 90% of the Republicans hate the police. I'm not saying no such thing. What I'm arguing is that there is a new vulnerability.
So not to point this out, but there's actual like polling you can look up to give you the real numbers of these, and I don't think they're as favorable to Brianna Joy Gray's campaign as she thinks they are. I genuinely don't think that, like, she constantly tries to do this, like, no, there's like an audience on the right who's like willing to hear these arguments, which sure, kind of. Do I think, like, I've had enough conversations with people where they're like, yeah, I get it, but like, I just don't trust Democrats, or like, I just think it's woke. There's a lot of things that people like, there's a lot of chipping away that you have to do just for individual people to move an entire party completely different, like such a different campaign that you'd have to run.
In their arguments, there's a new subtlety to these arguments where for the first time in perhaps a long time.
I'm gonna do that. What is going on? Okay, there we go.
Republicans can imagine a world in which they are oppositional to the police. It's not just a consequence of 1-6. I don't know if you watched that Andrew Callahan documentary. There are all of these interesting moments that are burbling up. And Marjorie Taylor Greene saying this thing about the FBI was in some ways like the highest profile crack in what has been a very formidable defense or alignment, I should say, of Republicans and the police since time immemorial, it seems. Now, you can say that's not a real thing. It's a superficial crack. It's not a real thing. It doesn't matter. And I understand that you disagree with this, but my perspective is it's worth chipping away at that and see how far we can go. Let's chip away at that and either force them to double down and go back to saying they love the police and that's fine, whatever, no love lost, or create opportunities. If they're going to tell their audiences, if they're going to speak to the average conservative voter and say, actually, the police aren't always good. Oh, actually, maybe we shouldn't have qualified immunity. Maybe police members should be held accountable too, because sometimes they go after people that I like. How is it delusional? Even Donald Trump, there's been a conservative push to end qualified immunity for years. That's like a real thing.
They are only after power if it's in their way. There is no institutional support for broad police reform.
Of course that's true, Vaush,
the current conservative darlings are Trump, who said that we should suspend the Constitution, and DeSantis, who is currently constructing his own little Oceania down there in Florida. The current leading conservative constitutional interpretation theory is one where they essentially abolish originalism and go in favor of what, like, a kind of paternalistic Christian nationalism. They are purely authoritarian in every element of their political advocacy, and coincidentally, the only time they seem to have a problem with power is when it's in their way. Why would you ever give this any weight or credence?
What's so crazy about
why pretend it's a crack? It's not a crack. They're a unified wall.
What's crazy is that, like, literally in my radar, like every time I talk about these things, I'll say exactly that, and you don't hear it. Like, it's like you don't want to hear it.
It's a steel block.
I'll say, hey, audience, this is a principle, whether it's free speech or limiting government power, and you believe in it. Now, the people that you like on the right who are talking about these things, they're saying they believe in those things, but they're not really good faith actors. They're just trying to protect their own. I just did a radar like this about the IRS. So if you genuinely believe in these principles, like the poor shouldn't be targeted by the IRS, here's alternative policy. For example, part of Bernie Sanders' wealth tax was to have a 30%, I think, quota for millionaires and billionaires getting taxed to try to correct for how disproportionately poor people are getting or audited, not taxed, right? So you meet them where they are. You say, I understand why these things appeal to you. They're not actually going to do those things to help you.
Right.
So then you pivot. That's all this is. And look, at the end of the day,
that was good. I have no problem at all.
That's literally what my radar was. But you have a hang about Marjorie Taylor Greene, and that's fine. You obviously think that she is more dangerous and more fascist.
I don't like fascists. That's true.
That's
the lefty principle.
So this is the thing. Bernie never did the Trump has a point thing, and Bernie never ever. So there were a couple times where Trump actually tried to do this, where he would defend Bernie from. Like he would defend the fact that Bernie was kind of gypped out of the midterms. Like he would defend Bernie. He would try to come to not come to Jesus, but he would try to come to some kind of alignment with Bernie Sanders by appealing to like Bernie was they kind of screwed over Bernie. I think Bernie could have won. Like maybe we can there's a kinship between us two, right? Like Trump tried to do that, but like there's a reason why that didn't really work out very well for Trump. It's because Bernie would consistently reject any kind of alignment Trump would make with him, because Bernie knew that he couldn't give Trump space to stand next to Bernie, only his followers. Never once would Bernie accept Trump being around him or Trump aligning himself with him. But his voters, on the other hand, he's okay with speaking to. The problem with Brianna Joy Gray's radar and the way that she went about it is she aligned herself with Marjorie Taylor Greene. She basically stood with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and her concept is like, I'm going to speak to her audience, and then her and parts of her audience, or me and parts of her audience, are going to step back and go in our direction. I'm going to stand next to her to gain access to her voters, access to her, her followers, and through that, pull them over to my argument, which is not the same thing that Bernie did. Bernie never stood next to them. Because if you stand next to that person, you, at the end of the day, especially to conservatives, are going to look like a follower. And not only that, you're already coming to them. You're already coming to the leader. You never go to the leader. You can go to the voters, but you must avoid aligning yourself with the leaders, unless they're people that you agree with, obviously. But you can't go to the figureheads. The figureheads are incredibly fickle and will use their ability to shift their audience to undermine you.
Of mine. Look, that's literally. Wait, BJG, you've literally hit the issue. If everything that you had said was, here is an issue Republicans are concerned about, I don't think they're coming at it from the right angle. Here's the right angle. If that,
that's literally what I said in the radar. We'll play the radar right here, by the way, in the podcast, so everybody can see word for word. Marjorie Taylor Greene has become America's favorite broken clock, and it's that time of day where she's regretfully 100% right. Now,
let's be clear. It's not going to matter what she says next, because all they heard was she's right. That's the only bit of this they're interested in. The minute you say they are 100% right, is that you've already ceded all of the ground to them. Again, I know this isn't, it's not fun. Nobody likes the fact that that's right. That's how it is. But you've already ceded the ground. You've already given them all of the credit. You've given them all of the credence. You've handed over all the credit to them. So, and then you're going to try to say, hey, but like, I have a different way. Why would they go towards you? You've already told them that they're right. They've already heard what they need to hear from you. You've already been useful to them and to their movement. That's the day. That's the part. Because guess what? That's going to get clipped out, and they're never going to hear any of the nuance. They just won't. None of Marjorie Taylor Greene's audience is going to hear that nuance. And what do you do? Like what? Well, yeah, but like I had all of this to say. They're not interested in everything you have to say. They're only interested in what you have to say as long as it agrees with them. That's it.
I don't take her critique in good faith. I don't expect her to keep this up when a candidate of her liking is in control of the deep state. But you should. Her hypocrisy doesn't have to be the hypocrisy of the average conservative voter. I said Marjorie Taylor Greene is a bad faith actor. They don't really mean this. They're only doing this to protect Trump. However, this is what the left should be doing. And the fact that I say that fast and you still hit me with all these bad face attacks. And by the way, you didn't just call Marjorie Taylor Greene a fascist. You called me a fascist.
Fascist enabler at times. We'll get to your Ukraine takes, I'm sure. It's not about the core of the arguments you just laid out to me.
Do you think that's useful? I mean, if you honestly think I'm a fascist enabler and someone who wants to murder Ukrainian children,
the last one was a joke.
Wait a minute. But wait a minute. Why would you agree to come on Rising and look me in the face and be friendly and nice and act like all is well in the world? What? If you really have that level of antagonism toward me, if you really think that I'm as bad a person as you tell your audience repeatedly, then why even agree to come on Rising in the first place?
First of all, a couple of things. I've sat face to face with Charlie Kirk.
So have I.
Right, okay. I talked civilly with him. I don't have any qualms about that. Second of all, I say mean things about a lot of people. It's genuinely just...
But why, Vaush? Because I've been accused of being a grifter. I've been accused of ginning up, fighting over force. But I don't take personal attacks at people. I don't do response videos to try to create beef. In fact, I'm inviting you here today in part because I've ignored you. I've chosen not to engage. It doesn't seem constructive. But because you were so... you know, frankly, kind of polite and humble on Rising, I thought there might be a genuine opportunity for us to have a meeting of the minds at the very least. But then you make a joke like the one you just made, and it makes me feel like this was a fool's errand.
No, what we're having right now isn't a breakdown in communication. It's an aesthetic difference in how we approach what we do.
Well, I gotta tell you, human to human, I don't feel it like it's an aesthetic difference. It feels degrading and unconstructive in a space that actually means a lot to me, because I think the project that we're ostensibly both involved in is an incredibly important one. This isn't like, I'm not trying to be like famous on the internet from talking about politics.
Well, I only became a
well, no, I was an attorney with a very good salary that didn't need any of this, to be honest. So I'm here because my passion.
You can go back to being an attorney. You know that, right? Like you can just go back to being an attorney. Like the same way I can go back to just being like a cook and in like a kitchen, but there's like, I find this to be more meaningful. I would think. See, this is the problem also, is like Brianna Joy Gray, it seems like wants the wants to be a meaningful political actor without the part where you're going to disagree with people, you're going to have really contentious conversations and arguments with people. That's one of those things where it's like, yeah, like you kind of got to want that stuff. You kind of got to want to get not just in the weeds, but in the fucking dirt with people, and also be exposed to arguments that you don't like, people you don't like, mindsets that you don't like. Like, yeah, that's kind of part of it. Like, I don't know what this, like, oh, I don't need this. Like, okay, if you don't need it, if you don't want it, then there's the door, man. Go back to being go back to being a lawyer or whatever the fuck. No problem with that. Like, no, you don't have to participate in any of this stuff, but this is what you signed up for. Absolutely. You know, there's a reason, like, I use my regular name. I mean, obviously it's stylized, but like, I use my name. Like, the contact information, if you ever want to appear on this show, gives out my name rather openly. And it's because I already have an expectation that, you know, people are going to get personal. And at the very least, I'd like some control over that to a good degree. But, like, you know, I've accepted that there's going to be some contentious arguments. I had the first call I had was a contentious conversation with some guy. So, I mean, like, this is all part of it. This is all part of it. Like, I don't know what this, like, it's like, oh, I don't need this nonsense stuff is. Like, then go back to being a private person then. Don't be a public figure. But, you know, don't give me this bullshit. Like, you don't like the idea that when you speak, when you deliver political rhetoric, that it's not meaningful and that it impacts people.
Passion for these issues.
I could only be so lucky.
I ended up getting a full-time position, and I ended up getting plucked by the Bernie campaign to be a part of this. That's why I'm here. And I'm not trying to grandstand to say that, but like, I just want to be honest about, emotionally, it feels very frustrating to feel like you're trying to do something constructive. I'm open to criticism.
Politics is frustrating.
Different suggestions. We can go this way and that way. You don't like force the vote. Okay, so Rhoda had these other asks that was so constructive. We grew, we developed, we moved forward. But it seems to me that
we're still talking about force the vote.
Desire is to, like, coin winners or losers, dub winners or losers, good people or bad people, grifters and not grifters, fakes or legitimate folks. And that seems to be ultimately very destructive to me, to this broader.
Really, and that's not what force the vote was. Force the vote was not a legitimizing basically token
project that I think that we share. No.
We definitely share it to an extent. And I don't think that, I mean, there's obviously a huge overlap in the stuff that we actually do believe. I do genuinely believe that a lot of this is an aesthetic difference. If I was feeling cynical, I would accuse you of engaging in a kind of civility politic here, right? I mean, there were plenty of, like, sincere, well-minded political activists back in the 1980s would have shown up in leather strap or, like, punk mohawks.
Well, that wouldn't bother me.
They might have. Well,
and
they might have been
doesn't
mean.
bother me. That doesn't
they might
bother
have been
me.
Mean too, right?
Like, either you really think you believe that narrative that I am indifferent to the interests of Ukrainian children, or you don't. Like, which is it? Don't bring it up as like a joke. Do you think that I am happy, that I laugh at genocide and think it's great for Ukrainian children to be killed? Is that something that you think? Then let's talk it out. But don't bring it up as a joke.
I wasn't under the impression that particular bit would get to you so much. But if you want my sincere
opinion, it's not about it getting to me, Vaush. It's real life. I don't think that Ukrainian children being dead is a joke, in fact.
Wait, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to be insincere there. When I said got to you, I wasn't trying to epically own you by indicating you're emotionally involved in the stuff you talk about. I am too. The sincere, actual, non-joking, fully straightforward position that I have on that debate that you had was that I only saw the damn clip. But I do know that a lot of lefties, and people adjacent to lefties even, not just lefties, have attitudes on the Ukraine war that I consider to be outright fascist apologia. I don't think that makes them irredeemable people, or that I shouldn't speak to them, or that they're bad people fundamentally, or that they're malicious or lying or anything. But I do care about these issues, and it's a product of the fact that I care about these issues that I take the stances that I do. If I fly off the handle a little bit too much, I think that's a fine criticism. Nobody's perfect.
So having not, you didn't actually watch the episode, you just saw the clip and you made it a pin. Did you, I don't actually know, did you do a response video on my position on Ukraine?
I saw it on stream. If it got turned into a video, that would have been my editors. I don't think I talked about that for more than like 30 seconds though. So I don't think I did a full thing.
Okay.
I could be wrong on that.
Do you think it's responsible? Like maybe it's fine. Like I can't believe everyone makes clips about me. For all that I'm called a grifter, it seems that I'm fueling the media ecosystem of YouTube with everybody making clips about my original content.
Well, you know how much people dislike me, right? So that's a mutual thing right there. People get real mad about me.
I can't speak to what people.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Brianna. Don't do this don't give me this not you don't respond to random people on Twitter, or that you don't respond to people who don't respond to you back or whatever. Come on now. Again, you're a public figure. You got to get over this.
I've very consciously chosen not to engage because I don't think that kind of thing is constructive. And if somebody who wouldn't normally listening to me is listening to you and saying Medicare for all is a good idea, at the end of the day, I'll let sleeping dogs lie. To me, that's a net benefit, and I don't need to tear you down or talk about anybody else on the internet. That's not my business.
Well, right, you don't do reactive content quite as much, right? If you're live streaming, of course, you go over all the clips and videos and arguments and discourse that you see and react to it.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not, and I don't mean this, we're in different spaces and it's fine to be an entertainer. It's fine. But that's not my niche. So all I would say to that is I think it would be useful and good and probably actually elevate your content. I mean, that sounds patronizing. I don't mean it like that, but I think it would be useful and good to perhaps review everything in total, in context, to assume good faith of people. That's the irony of the name of my podcast. The whole point is that to try to engage legitimately and in good faith with all of these arguments, even with people I disagree. And that means not taking an isolated clip, or even within the clip, frankly, I think I make myself clear. But not taking
these are the differences of format. That's not really
to make jokes or claims about me. I like and enjoy the death of Ukrainian children. That's all I would say.
With respect, I think that
also I saw that clip. It was not great.
We're both culpable of this, even in this conversation to an extent. Like you mentioning that I'd called you subhuman, or you saying that it was disrespectful to the millions of dead that I might make a comparison to Nazi Germany. These are things that both of us do, intentionally or otherwise, to lower the opinion of the other in the eyes of our audience. Or I guess in this case, whoever is sympathetic to me who watches this content on your end, since I'm not live streaming. I don't think, look, I'm fine with banter and insults back and forth. I love that shit. Oftentimes I feel like a hyperfixation on it's to the detriment of the conversation because people get all up in arms about who's being ruder to who. The ideal is obviously for everyone to be polite. But we both shouted. We both made jabs at each other. I think that's wonderful.
I don't think it's bad faith. Shouting. I don't have an issue with any of that. I think that, look, at worst, I could be accused of, Vaush, not understanding the existential harm that Marjorie Taylor Greene and her politics present to the United States. At worst.
Right, which is bad. Yes, you should be able to recognize that. The same way you recognize the damage that Trump can do, you should absolutely be worried about Marjorie Taylor Greene.
You could say that I, underestimate the potential harm that could come of me saying that Marjorie Taylor Greene is right about this one narrow issue. And that's a perfectly legitimate criticism somebody can make. But you know that you went a lot further than saying that.
Fascist apologia, yeah. Which I stand by. I think that you've engaged in it to an extent. Okay. It's fine. Who doesn't do that, right? I mean, the first principle of being a lefty is to hate other lefties.
I don't think that I do.
And
in fact, I think that the FBI is a fascist organization, if we want to use these kinds of words. And I could easily say that wanting to defend and protect the FBI. I think that Biden's a fascist. I talked to Cornel West about this at length.
Then call me a fascist apologist. Do it. If you think that, then you should have no problem calling me that.
But I don't actually.
What in blazes? Hello? Hello? Oh, that was weird. That was odd.
Actually think that that's true, Vaush. And I also don't spend my time I attack the powerful. I'm interested in in criticizing Joe Biden because he has the power to affect so many lives. I'm interested in attacking institutions because they have the power to oppress people. I'm not interested in arguing with podcasters. You know what I mean?
You do realize that Marjorie Taylor Greene might not be president right now, but for all of the arguing you could do with Joe Biden, and as many misgivings as I have for the guy, I don't really think it's a wise or really expedient use of your time to be spending on piffy criticisms of Joe Biden when we have an actual fascist running Florida Like I don't think these things are equal, really. Like, I don't like Joe Biden, but I like him a lot more than I do somebody like Trump or Ron DeSantis. Like, and being able to recognize which target is more meaningful in the moment is important. Now you might say, oh, well, Biden's president right now, so we should really focus on him right now. To which I'd say, I do think there's a certain amount of time you should spend on Biden, but I would also ask you to have a realistic idea of what impact you can have on the Biden administration, especially now. Whereas you can have a lot bigger impact in damaging Trump and damaging DeSantis before the midterms, before the general, than you will Biden almost at any point. So there's also that.
Like, that's not the point. And I think that you serve a valuable role. I think a lot of people in this space who I've argued with and disagreed with serve a valuable role. People like Sam Cedar, people like Jimmy Dore, who I sometimes agree with and sometimes I don't. I don't spend my time. And it's frustrating, I got to say, when you exercise some restraint.
And if also you weigh everything as people who have something to say without with a disregard to what they're saying and the outcomes of what they're saying, like, that's also kind of a problem.
Don't spend all your time fighting with people for that to be characterized as having alliances and secret cabals of, like, it's ridiculous.
Well,
like,
I'm not making those criticisms.
I mean, you do have alliances.
Stuff I think you've said or made points about.
No,
I understand that, you know, the tribalism here can get out of order from time to time. We obviously do different kinds of content, but I'm glad you understand at least that there's a direction to this. Criticizing people in power is fine and good, but sometimes bringing on some dipshit MAGA hat to argue with for 2 hours while calling him every possible word that won't get you banned from YouTube is legitimately a good way of moving over people from the right. It sounds stupid, but especially with the right, you know, oftentimes their allegiances have more to do with conveyed strength than actual arguments. So if you can make somebody look kind of funny and make a couple of good jokes, they'll take you more seriously. And
so what's the difference between that? Let me ask you, like, what's the difference between that and what I'm talking about with alluding to the fact that, oh, you like Marjorie Taylor Greene? Here, what about my pet project over here on the left? Because there are people who said after your Rising appearance, you know, it's wrong to ask Vaush to talk about this because of past statements he's made about women. You know, it's wrong. It's inappropriate. It's hypocritical. Like, you can make any argument that any person is inappropriate to allude to or to bring into a part of a conversation or to respect in any way or to validate rather in any way.
If there's a legitimate argument to be made against them showing up on a show, you could make any argument, but I don't think anybody, like, that's.
So what is the difference between you debating Charlie Kirk? Are you and I validating Charlie Kirk and his beliefs, or that he's a legitimate political figure by engaging with him in debate? Some people think so.
No, because Charlie Kirk has an equal, if not larger, platform.
In my conversation with him that I thought kind of spoke to the principle you were talking about showing them up or brain cucking them or whatever term you used. He was talking about.
Sure I've never
you might have used that term. He was talking about the pharmaceutical industries and how they're bad. Fauci, whatever. God, you know. And then I said, you know, you can't pull that crap with me. I want to nationalize these industries. You can't, like, this doesn't work with me. Will you nationalize them? And he dropped the subject. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's like a very workable example of what you're saying is good to do.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about differences, right? In this particular, and I'll do the Godwin's Law bit one more time. Okay, I swear, just one. You know, it was a treat, and I'm dropping it forever. I've read up a lot on the whole Nazis, fall of the Weimar, whatever. There was a strong intellectual weakness on the part of the Stalin-backed communists in Germany at the time. The attitude was, around a lot of them, a tendency to underestimate the Nazis. The idea that this was just like another upsurge of conservatism, a populist conservatism that could be used by them. And they ended up actually being supportive of some of the institutional destruction that was done by the Nazis as they slowly, like, undid German democracy because they felt that it was a sort of a dismantling of bourgeois democracy. I am very, very, very... what's the term? Vigilant, I guess, of tendencies that I see in line with that. You know, obviously I'm not perfect in what I see is, you know, like, leans into that. I could be wrong in my assessment. I feel confident on this one, but I do have a particular, like, fucking, can I say that here? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, what? Okay, I was so good this entire time. I have a thing with that specific subject. And I do think a lot of lefties really underestimate it. You know, it was like the Bernie.
I think what he's also, like the important thing to always kind of keep in mind also is not just the harm that, like, your political alignment does, but also an understanding of what direction the, like, you know, in this case, the abolition of the FBI, of what direction the person who you're aligning yourself with wants to take that in. That's probably the biggest part of this, because at the end of the day, you know, it is a bet on yourself that you'll convince, a lot of people or enough people that you are the real, anti FBI person, we'll say, right? But you have to have some kind of idea that that the other side is interested in the fundamental critique you're making. Like Vaush brought up Charlie Kirk as an example, bringing up like the pharmacy industry, which I've had this conversation with of some conservative family members where they don't like the way drug companies function, and they're not crazy about the way that the insurance companies function. They know that there's a problem. They're not quite sure what it is, but they know that it's like unfair to people, right? We have an agreement on that it's unfair to people, right? That it's unfair, it's predatory. The pharmaceutical industry is pushed constantly toward the propagation of profits and not the positive outcomes of their medicine reaching people. These are things that we fundamentally agree on. They're strong agreeances, right? But what we don't have in the case of the FBI thing that Brianna Joy Gray is bringing up is the fundamental belief that the FBI is a corrupt institution. We don't have that agreement with the right. They don't think the FBI is bad because Fred Hampton, MLK, warrantless wiretapping of Americans. They don't think any of this stuff is bad, right? To them, the only singular issue that Marjorie Taylor Greene was speaking to was conservative bias. It's the same way how Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Candace Owens, Michael Knowles, all these guys, what do they always complain about? Bias from YouTube, from big tech, from all of these things, right? And what Brianna Joy Gray is arguing or advocating for is to agree with them that yes, big tech is really bad, but these are like the reforms that we have to fix or whatever. In her mind, she's like, oh, I'll speak to Daily Wire subscribers and say, hey, like you guys are right. YouTube does have problems with the way that they censor certain content, but I think you're wrong on what content they're targeting. And the problem is a subscriber to the Daily Wire, a subscriber to Matt Walsh, to any of these people are not like they're not in a position at that moment to come over and say, okay, what else are they doing? What they are primarily concerned with is bias against them. They believe they are the victims, and you are legitimizing that victimization by agreeing with their leaders' framing of big tech censorship. So you do have to be really, really careful, I think, with not legitimizing certain aspects of that, which I think Brianna Joy Gray ended up doing. I think her overall concept, I think, is sound. Like, I understand what she's saying, where it's like, oh, they're making an argument. What if I made a stronger, like, similar argument? But you have to do that in the right context and at the right moment and involving the correct players on the field, right? If Mitch McConnell brings up something like this, you can go after Mitch McConnell because he has a lack of trust with the conservative Republican audience online. But you can't do that with Marjorie Taylor Greene. She simply has too much of that trust. You're going after too popular of a target to deliver that message. Marjorie Taylor Greene, as much as we don't like it and as much as we think she's a dumb fuck, because she is strong within the Republican movement, meaning it's going to be even harder to peel off an audience from her. So you have to pick your targets a lot better. You have to pick your moments a lot better. That's like the key fundamental difference here between that and like going on Tim Pool against Charlie Kirk and challenging Charlie Kirk. He's in an environment where his viewers will be supporting him, but they're like the venue the venue that you're both entering into kind of demands a certain ideological deference to good points for some people. You can peel off a little more of those people because they go, well, you know, you can't say that the moderator was biased because it's Tim Pool, and I think Tim Pool is like a centrist, and I thought that this other guy made really good points, even though I like Charlie. You know, maybe this Vaush guy made some good points. Maybe I'll look into them a little bit more. Maybe I'll click on a video of his, instead of just ignoring it, or like maybe I'll go search out and watch some other videos on the topic. That might happen. But what Brianna Joy Gray is trying to argue is from like a legislative standpoint, which I don't think would work nearly as well. You would have to get buy-in from the mainstream media. You would also have to assume that their points aren't undermined by Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's going to use the influence she has in her audience to just turn them against the entire, abolish the FBI movement. You know what I'm saying? So it's, I like what she's saying conceptually is usually sound. The problem is most of the time the timing is off, and the actual target in the way you approach it, I think always, or at least so far, like in terms of force the vote and the FBI thing, very flawed timing, very flawed target acquisition, to use a term.
Bus discourse too with Biden and Trump, and so many lefties were like, yeah, Trump and Biden are two sides of the same coin. They don't understand. A lot of them just don't understand. Bourgeois democracy may be a killer, but it is infinitely better than what we could be living under. And I think that leftism can only really even have a chance at making its arguments if we exist in a system that's not openly persecuting us in the way that the MAGA crowd probably would if there's a chance they got. I mean, God,
I'm out of water.
Started putting out insurrection charges and all the BLM protesters, it would have been over for democracy in this country. Thank God he got ousted when he did. So that's a bugbear for me. But it's not born of insensitivity or bad faith tendencies on my part. These are sincere things I care about.
So I understand your argument. Yours, it's the mainstream argument. It's the mainstream Democratic liberal argument. It is, in fact, the vote blue no matter who argument, right?
Wow. For somebody who wants to have good faith conversations, I'd say that's pretty bad faith, quite frankly, just to basically be like, oh, yeah, okay, if that's your argument, then you're not part of the left. You're a centrist liberal. You're a shit lib. That's she's now this video is going to end in a minute, and now she's already framed this as like, okay, well, that's not a left position, so like you can't own any lefty cred or lefty position on this now.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
But wait a minute. I honestly don't feel like you understand my argument. With respect, that was part 1 of a 2-part 3-hour interview. Part 2 will drop on.
Jesus Christ. Okay, I guess that's what we're doing Monday. You know the thing that they tell, like at the end of all YouTube videos where they tell you to like click on one of these like things to watch more videos. Yeah, I've been meaning to film one of those. So that's what I was doing. I was just setting it up to film one.